Tom Martin, and welcome to another episode of A San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series featuring yours truly, Tom Martin. I'm a longtime journalist. I produce stories for ABC News, CNN, CBS News, many other outlets. And I love meeting interesting people, hearing thought-provoking, and participating in thought-provoking conversation. And that's exactly what we do here. I am joined by author David Parker from San Francisco. David is the author of 2 books, a third one on the way. David is the author of Income and Wealth and a San Francisco Conservative. That's the title of the book and the title of our podcast. And again, David joins us from San Francisco. Hi, David. How are you today?
I'm fine. It's raining here, but I'm fine.
I've heard you've got some weather up there. Yes. I hope you all are safe and well.
Oh, yes. I'm high on a hill.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I'm high on a hill. I'm on Twin Peaks.
That's key. That's good for you. Yes. I've heard it's quite some weather there. What I wanted to talk about today, I'm always learning something during these conversations, especially about the historical context for issues that we see in the news that, again, being a lifelong journalist, we report on the issues of the day and so on, but usually they're stripped of any historical context whatsoever. And you literally went back to school after your 40 plus, 50 plus year career as an educator to learn yourself and study history and political economy and so on. And one incident in the news, I'm kind of a politics junkie, I will admit. One incident in the news was the round after round after round of voting to elect the new Speaker of the House in Congress to replace your neighbor Nancy Pelosi there. So finally, Kevin McCarthy prevailed, and journalists, some of whom I know as friends, were saying, "Oh my gosh, can democracy survive? We've never seen anything like this." Well, technically, we did see some, 15 rounds, I think back in 1859, I think they said. So what should we keep in mind? You've studied the founding fathers and sort of the foundations of our nation. Is this a dramatic, the sky is falling kind of a moment?
Absolutely not. The founding fathers have created a very limited government. They said government shouldn't be doing anything, and that's exactly what it's doing. Nothing, and the country doesn't fall apart. Yet everybody's screaming at each other. That's a healthy sign. Before World War II, 1930s, when Hitler and Mussolini and the Japanese emperors and their crews came to power, the citizens didn't say anything. They didn't object. We're objecting to everything. We're objecting to the tie people are wearing. That's a healthy sign. And we shouldn't be asking government to do anything. We weren't designed that way. So that's why they're fighting all the time. Everyone's disagreeing on what government should do. And we have such gerrymandered elections that the left, anybody on the left won because he was the most extreme. And on the right, that person won because he was the most extreme. He's never running in a district where he has to convince everybody. If that were the case, they would be more moderate, and we wouldn't have the silliness in Congress. But we have the silliness because a moderate nation has to watch extremists fighting it out, when in fact the nation isn't extreme. It's really and talking about journalism, I love to say that journalism is the reporting of history from the perspective of the moment. Well, you can throw that out. I report, everything I write is from the perspective of thousands of years. And I'm saying that the issues are not different then in Athens and in Rome and in the Age of Enlightenment, same issues, and only better arguments then. And that's why I write. So here's some better arguments for what we're talking about. So in that sense, history is important.
Sorry to interrupt. I know you've said that a number of authors and philosophers going back, as you said, thousands of years can actually shed light, or their writing can actually shed light on current issues, right?
Well, yeah, that's one of my points. Yes, if you read If I would read you some passages from Aristotle, from his chapter on politics, and didn't tell you, you would have no idea. It sounds like us. He talks like us, except the level of the language is so much higher. The level of the argument is so much higher that I'm moved when I read that stuff in first century Rome. And then that's history. But then if you go to school, you should study some culture. You know, American armies went to Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan without any understanding of the cultures we were diving into. And we lost those three areas because of that. One, maybe we shouldn't have gone in, or shouldn't have gone in such a big way. And our goals maybe shouldn't have been so big. These countries have no history of democracy or fair play or human rights. And we're fighting along as if we're going to make these countries into something that they're not. That's history, or that's education. So we're at a very low point in world history. Not technologically, not advances in medicine, but beyond that, we're at a very low point in human history.
Yeah, I came across an article recently that made me think of you, of course. Apparently there was a conference of historians, authors, perhaps college history professors and so on. And some of them were debating the question, is history really important? I couldn't believe they're even asking that question, but like maybe it should be an elective in schools. Maybe we need to scale back. Maybe children need to learn technical skills or something like that. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I can't wait to hear what David has to say about this. But what do you say to these historians who think, well, maybe we could scale back, maybe it's not really relevant? I mean, you just told us it's just as relevant, but I was just curious what your reaction to that would be.
It's stupid beyond belief. I went on a tour of a middle school in San Francisco with my grandson, who's looking at schools, and the whole tour they're talking about the emotional support they give to the students and how good we are at including autistic students in our program, and they're talking about inclusivity. I was waiting for him to make one statement about academic rigor, what subjects they were teaching. And my grandson asked, I was going to ask right when he did, do you teach foreign language? Because our family all speaks French, and he knows French. Oh, no, we don't teach French. We teach a little Spanish, a little Mandarin. It's a Chinese-oriented school. But that's not on our mind. Very good. No discussion to a whole group of parents on what the academic rigor of the school is and who the professors are, who the teachers are, what are their qualifications. Our teachers are very good at classroom management. We don't have time to teach, but those kids are not running around, and that's all you care about anyway. Not quite what he said, but that was the message. I says, very good, perfect. It's exactly what I'm talking about. Close the schools.
Amazing.
Put those kids to work.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I have a follow-up question to that, of course, but I just want to take a quick minute for our viewers and our listeners to thank you for joining us, of course, for another conversation of a San Francisco conservative. If you're watching this on YouTube, our YouTube channel, San Francisco Conservative, the podcast, please click on the subscribe button so that you will not miss a single episode of our conversation, and leave a comment. Also, we'd love to hear from you and your thoughts and so on. And you can also listen to future episodes and past episodes on David's website, davidparkeressays.com. But I want to get back to the conversation. So again, David, you were a public school teacher for most of your life there in San Francisco's public schools, teaching music, 40 years, another 10 years as a volunteer. And you must have really seen how the evolution of, speaking of academic rigor, maybe the decline of academic rigor. What did you observe during all those years?
I mean, might get me in trouble, but the schools are so concerned about inclusivity, and we don't want especially Black and Latin and Native Americans, to be flunking. And we want them to feel part of it. And the only way is to lower standards, because these are people from an oral culture. Parents are not reading to them. They're not talking to them at home. And schools do not want to admit that all learning takes place between the age of 0 and 3. And if you miss it, you don't have a chance, because you have kindergartners are coming with 4,500 to 6,500 word deficit. You can't catch that up.
Yeah.
Because they didn't hear words at home. They didn't have discussions at home. I got in trouble as a school teacher my whole 50 years because I would hold standards. And as I taught, my standards went down. I know because I taught the same grade for the whole teaching career. After about 20 years, okay, one less piece for the spring concert, for example, or one less scale, or one less exercise, and in front of my very eyes, 1/2. I was teaching my last year 1/2 what I was teaching when I first started. Nobody can tell me anything. I've been teaching, I'm in the trenches, and I'm holding standards that I'm getting reprimanded by principals for being too tough. If we're going to play Mary Little Lamb, you're going to play it right. You're not going to miss one note each time you play it. And in the past, you wouldn't be playing Mary Little Lamb. We'd be playing something more advanced, like Twinkle Little Star.
Well, it's funny. I want to circle back to something you said. No, that is interesting that you personally observed sort of this decline. That let's go easier and easier and easier on the students. And I would agree with you.
Not to expel students, not to send them to the office every time they're acting up. You deal with it. And teachers do that now. They're very good. It's called classroom management. They learn. That's a career in itself.
Yeah. I want to circle back a little bit to something you said earlier. I know from our many previous conversations that you appreciate the fact that where you live really is a melting pot. The schools you've taught in is a melting pot. Your own family heritage is, an immigrant story, as mine is also going back a few generations. And so when you say, and I don't know if you said this in this particular conversation today, but you said a lot of people are demanding, well, we should teach, the culture of Europe. We should teach the culture of the African nations and so on to make everybody in our melting pot feel welcome. I know you've commented that there's actually a very good reason why we should teach American history here in America, and has nothing to do with discrimination. But why is it important to teach American history?
We are a nation of immigrants, people who have fled their culture, fled their home, their family, everything, their childhood friends, for a better life. They didn't come here to hear how good their country is and how good their culture is. So we have a nation now that is not united. There's no core curriculum. All Americans should be studying the history and culture of British and American democracy, which is a great, great culture. And people come here, they realize that's why the prosperity is here, that our laws, if you're arrested, you have to be accused and released right away. All that stuff. And we're not learning it. The French education minister made an announcement to almost the country. He says, don't look at America with their multiculturalism. That's completely wrong. In France, we teach French history and French culture, which is really an enormous and a marvelous thing. French culture is very highly developed. And that unites the nation. A French person anywhere in the world has the same education, and they can bond with each other, and it makes them proud of their country. Americans are not have the same education. They're not being taught to be proud of their country and proud of the British and American democracy. Well, they're learning everything else to make people feel included. That's a huge mistake. And the standards are so low. We are among the lowest performing of industrialized countries. Our education system is the lowest. And the U.S. Department of Education, you can go online. 36% of Americans are proficient in math and reading. That's in the past, that wasn't the case. It was probably at least twice that.
And is that because demands are not, I guess I remember one motivational speaker I like talking about, an old, boxer from like the 1940s, saying, how do somebody asked, how did you get to be so muscular, so strong? He said, every day I push against amazing resistance. It's like going to the gym, and it seems kind of comparable for the children. Like, let's make demands of them. Let's get them to use a little brain power here, because that's how it grows, right?
Yeah. No, we're not. Americans are proud to say they have a high school degree. Today, a high school degree, you're reading it about between the 5th and 8th grade level, and compared to classical education in Europe and in Asia. And I guess there's no greater proof than the San Jose Mercury News announces every year that 71% of all employees in Silicon Valley are foreign born. We don't hire Americans. They can't do the work.
Says a lot.
That says a lot. That says a lot.
So in addition to being a lifelong educator and an author and a jazz musician, you're also a father and a grandfather. And I was just curious if I'm sure you practice what you preach as far as encouraging your own children, adults now, of course, and maybe even your grandchildren, your young grandchildren, what they should be studying in school. Do you?
Well, the public schools are very bad, but they're not totally very bad. San Francisco has 100 schools, approximately 10. You can, as a parent, you can just send your kid there and come back on the last day when it graduates and not worry about it, because they are fine. They're like they were in the 50s and 60s. They're holding standards. And so we did what we could to make sure our grandkids and our own kids got into those schools, because I was in those schools as a kid. And the famous economist Milton Friedman, who's one of the main voices for vouchers for choice in education, he says, I went to public school. They were fine when I was a kid. They were fine, but they're not anymore. That's why he started that thing of giving parents the money that the taxpayers are paying so they can go to a better school, especially poor kids. That's his line. Especially poor kids are getting really shortchanged. If you live in the upper middle class neighborhoods, those schools are probably okay, because the parents and the PTAs now in the upper middle class public schools are loaded with money, $100,000 to $300,000 PTAs, and they're hiring teachers galore. Science teachers, art teachers. They're not asking the teacher to teach a little science. They hire a science teacher, and they have whole lessons, and they have real artists teaching. So the top schools are like private schools in San Francisco. They're really very good. And our grandkids and our kids went to those schools. I didn't pay a dime for private school. I don't like the notion of private schools. Yeah. I like public schools.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I guess we probably only have time for another question here, but again, I've enjoyed what you've shared with me over the years about entrepreneurialism and the power of the individual, and like that belief that I certainly have, that everyone has a gift and a talent inside them, and so it's a matter of bringing it out. And if the school administration feels pressured to teach African history and European history and so on, to maybe reassure immigrant children, like, you're okay, we appreciate you, in a way, isn't that sort of denying that that vote of confidence, like, you can do it, come meld in our culture here, we think you have the potential for greatness here in America.
Right. And in America, that's really going to backfire, because the public schools are not teaching much Asian history. They're not teaching European history, because those students are doing fine. They're not asking for it. they're interested in American and British.
Mm.
And so by forcing it, it's gonna backfire.
Interesting.
It's gonna backfire.
Wow. Well, I think we're out of time. I certainly enjoyed this conversation. And again, you've been listening to A San Francisco Conservative, the podcast. And that's A San Francisco Conservative is the title of David's most recent book. And prior to that, another excellent book, Income and Wealth. You can find both of them on his website, davidparkeressays.com. You can find them on amazon.com. And make sure, again, to visit the YouTube channel and hit the subscribe button. Any final words you want to share, David, before we go?
Well, that was part of today's discussion, is that history is important. And all my examples in my writing, unlike in academics, they're examples from history and they're examples from business. I've been very successful in business, and I bring all my lessons into my writing on historical matters. I believe that's the charm of my books.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. Don't miss them. Absolutely. Well, thanks again. I look forward to the next time.
Good. I'll be back.